Hi everyone, this is the session 8.3 in a long day. We're discussing about the European policies towards the Balkans and towards the Turkey and the Eastern Partnership. This particular section is dedicated to discussing EU integration strategies in the region, and I have the pleasure to be together with some colleagues. We have very interesting papers to present. I'll first start with Jovan Teokarevic, who is a professor at the University of Belgrade, also a visiting professor at the College of Europe in Warsaw, and who is going to present us, who is going to talk to us about what is entitled Differentiated Integration in Western Balkan Accession. Jovan, you have the floor.
Thank you. So you see the topic, and reading many things that were written after the introduction of the new enlargement methodology, I noticed something that was not so hard to notice, that actually what has been missing from these debates is the analysis of the relationship between the EU's internal and external differentiated integration on one side and the possibility of the Western Balkan countries' accession under the new methodology. And I tried to some extent to fill in the void by focusing on possible outcomes of the new enlargement methodology within the context of differentiated integration, both within and beyond the EU. And I will argue, I'm saying this at the very beginning. Let me see if, okay, this is working. I will argue that some of the defining aspects of the new methodology might lead to the situation in which some less than full membership options for the Western Balkan countries will emerge in future as the only or most viable formulas for their relationship with the EU. This would run counter, of course, to the prospect of full membership, a promise that the EU has not formally changed since the Thessaloniki summit. The promise, to be sure, as we all know, has been guaranteed only when all membership criteria would be fully met. This might, however, never happen, and I wanted to somehow introduce this dark picture in the conference, judging by the sluggish accession of the region states so far and by very difficult and specific problems that they are obviously unwilling or incapable of solving. On the other side of the equation, the EU's integration capacity is and will probably remain lower than before due to its own multiple crises, divisions, and enlargement fatigue. All this, in my opinion, might lead to the situation in which both sides could opt for partial, associated, or junior memberships, in contrast to their decades-long formal promises and commitments concerning full EU membership. My speculation, because this is what I'm talking about the future trends, claims that the new enlargement methodology could be instrumental in this regard. And of course, it goes without saying that the end result of the Western Balkan accession could be the same within the old enlargement methodology too. Three novelties of this methodology introduced in this year by the European Commission might, however, increase the possibility of less than full membership options, in contrast to the Commission's and expectations of many other people and institutions. Before I move to those three, allow me to say something about the context. Its most important element is the evident fact that differentiated integration is a new normal of the EU. It is here to stay and most likely grow in the years to come, and it will continue to be the important part of the context or the EU edifice or construction within which future Western Balkan countries' accessions are to happen. This is equally true for internal and external differentiated integration. Put simply, the former implies that EU member states differ among themselves concerning the level of integration within legal and policy areas, and legal framework and policy areas, and some below. So some go above, some below. Those on the plus side use instruments like enhanced cooperation, and those on the negative side use well-known instruments, so-called opt-outs and transitional arrangements. In its internal form, it's important to know that differentiated integration has been allowed and so far institutionalized in the EU. In each subsequent treaty revision since Maastricht, it has been given a more prominent role, which makes it easier to implement. Lisbon Treaty continued this trend and offered even more convenient conditions for at least 1/3 of member states to go deeper in their cooperation and mutual integration, in contrast to others which lack the will or the capacity to follow them. As a norm rather than an exception today, this kind of differentiated integration is an integral part of the EU integration, not its negation. And while critics emphasize its potential disruptive effects on the unity and the creation of two or more classes of membership, the supporters point to its positive sides: the ability to overcome gridlocks, allowing for concerted action in some areas by member states with the same interests. In addition, differentiated integration does not prevent the inclusion of other states, but on the contrary, it expects it and is now regulated. Sorry, I had a lecture today, a very long one in Belgrade. It is now regulated to a much higher level than before, which includes, and I emphasize this, decision-making about it within and by the institutions of the European Union itself. The revival of interest for differentiated integration occurred a few years ago as a result, on the one side, of the radical increase of members that led to the unprecedented heterogeneity within the EU, complicated its decision-making, and on the other side, as a result of current complex and multiple EU crises. It has been seen by many as a panacea for both. The question I'm asking myself and everybody else is it a panacea for future accessions of the Western Balkan countries as well? Or is it a sword of Damocles for them, particularly in the light of the new enlargement methodology? At this point, we arrive at the second and at the same time for our topic, more important part of differentiated integration, its external dimension, or in other words, different levels and models of integration between the EU and non-members. The already existing debate from the last decade has been enriched in the past few years because of Brexit, of course. And while it's still uncertain what type of relations will the UK finally have with the EU in future, the way it will be done might become one of the models the analysts have contemplated on, in addition to the ones I mentioned here in my presentation. So the Norwegian or the EEA model, the Swiss model, or some other possible models, perhaps most suitable for Turkey and Western Balkan countries, that are closer than ENP countries to the EU membership. Turkey and the Western Balkans, seem to be still interested in joining the EU, but are incapable of doing that anytime soon. These are the most mentioned non-full membership options for the Western Balkans and Turkey. So it's the Association Plus, or partial membership, or limited membership, or junior membership. In most interpretations, these options would include all or most of the following. First, full inclusion in some EU policy areas. Second, gradual integration, one area after another. In the third place, participation in structural and regional EU programs and funds, and also in deliberations in EU institutions, but without voting rights. And perhaps not for all, but at least for some countries, security partnerships. In other words, participation in the common foreign and security policy of the EU. And now I come to my main points. Three novelties of the new enlargement methodology might, however, increase the prospect of less than full membership options, in contrast to the widely spread expectations. First, clustering negotiating chapters has advantages, of course, as it offers a more focused view on thematically connected negotiating chapters. But, and this is a big but, it is also conducive to the phenomenon that can be named the division of membership, or in other words, partial membership in some policy areas, now broader after this enlargement methodology was launched, than individual chapters. If meeting the acquis in one EU policy area will lead, as still vaguely promised by the EU, and probably very much expected by the candidates, if it will lead to higher financial benefits and the status of an almost equal membership in this particular area, this could be accepted actually on both sides. EU aspirants could show and enjoy some tangible results of a very long and difficult accession, and the EU member states could keep the door for them half opened, while never negating the original goal of offering full membership to Western Balkan countries and Turkey. Secondly, the Commission expects that a stronger political steer, this is their wording, should lead to the situation in which, and I quote, member states will be involved more strongly and have better opportunities to monitor and review the process. Now, given the bad aspects of the ongoing nationalization of the enlargement policy, coupled with a lack of enthusiasm for further enlargement, the politicization could in fact have completely opposite effects, in my view, with a strengthening of already more demanding conditions and further prolongation of negotiations. And while the much criticized bureaucratic Brussels approach might be avoided with a stronger political steer, this steer could continue to be projected at the same time from different member states, in addition to EU institutions, in an coordinated manner. In this way, the conditionality might be even less focused on priorities, might become diffused and perhaps contradictory, and more difficult to follow at the receiving end. The perspectives of the aspirants' neighbors, which those neighbors haven't been shy in imposing their own preferences to the list of accession conditions, is certainly of special significance in this sense, as the former case of Greece and the actual example of Bulgaria vis-à-vis one and the same country, North Macedonia today, clearly show. And finally, the third novelty within the new enlargement methodology, while the emphasis on the much acclaimed reversibility clause, or in EU words, more decisive measures sanctioning any series of prolonged stagnation or even backsliding is justified, it could in the long run actually lead to Western Balkan states and EU drifting further apart, along the lines of the unfortunate Turkish EU path, maybe even to the point of no return. In other words, after repeated backsliding and interruptions of negotiations, both sides could find out that it's in their joint interest to settle for less, at least temporarily, and try to achieve the original goal of full membership in more, now even more phases, without officially abandoning the original goal, just finding another way towards it. It is not difficult to imagine continued lack of enough progress in the rule of law and democracy areas in future, in the Western Balkans too, particularly because the announced clearer conditions for candidate countries are still to come. In case of further Turkey-like alienation between the EU and the Western Balkans 6, it will prove much more difficult to bring EU hopefuls back to the negotiating table than it is now, and to demand full realization of conditions for perhaps a smaller reward, something less than a full membership.
I would like to thank Professor Teokarevic for his presentation, which focused, which advanced the argument that we're moving towards the possibility of differentiated integration towards the Western Balkans, and what has put into motion this change has been the new methodology that was decided in the beginning of the year. I will go later on for questions, and you have given me a lot of ideas. But for the time being, I'll move to the second speaker, to Marko Milenkovic, who is a research fellow at the Institute of Social Sciences in Belgrade, and also at the same moment an affiliate researcher at the Center for Constitutional Studies and Democratic Development in the School of Advanced International Studies of the Bologna Center of Johns Hopkins University. Marko is going to talk to us about his theme is current and future differentiated EU integration trajectories for the Western Balkans. So we're expecting some convergence, at least in principle. Marko, you have the floor.
Thank you, Professor Tzifakis, and thanks to Professor Petrovic and Professor Bieber for inviting me to join this interesting conference. I'm maybe going to speak about the topic a bit more from the legal perspective, and this is something I've been dealing with within one of my associate fellowships at Hopkins from 2018, the differentiated integration of the Balkans as a rising or re-rising academic topic, and I'm now going to share my presentation. So how did I structure this paper and how I'm going to present my argument? First, I will just address everything briefly. First, the rising relevance of the EU differentiated integration for the Western Balkans, then relating it to enlargement fatigue, also something I call accession fatigue, and Europeanization process and conditionality, and then look into the current models of external differentiation for the Balkans, but also way forwards for Europeization and reforms in the absence of membership. So, as Professor Teokarevic has already pointed out, there is a growing interest in differentiated integration in last couple of years, sort of renaissance of the topic. There are also these three very interesting Horizon projects working on various aspects of differentiation and organizing a number of interesting meetings. Of course, the part of this rise is due to disintegration and the Brexit process. My premise from which I start is that basically it's prudent to reconsider Western Balkan integration in the context of prolonged crises and large fatigue, and then to start exploring legal and political alternatives that would not entail the full membership. And this is something I've been doing for some time. So we can do that, but looking into existing comprehensive modes of association and external differentiation, but we can also look into different other models. So this is all after the decades of enlargement and what I also call accession fatigue, which I'll explain in few minutes. But what I think most of the people share in this conference is this notion that negative experiences with the previous rounds of enlargement have indeed influenced very much the current process for current candidate countries. So moving to enlargement strategies in the last few years, mainly the one the enlargement strategy of 2018 should be seen as a part of a larger Commission package to kind of give surprises that the EU is facing. So as pointed out several times during the previous sessions, only for Serbia and Montenegro, there was some time of a horizon given for 2020 5, with the Commission agreeing that it is extremely ambitious. New negotiation methodology, I think Professor Teokarevic covered that quite comprehensively. Also, not openly, but touches the idea of differentiation. This idea of phasing in candidates into the EU policies and EU meetings is basically on the line of EU differentiated integration. But there is also this idea of advancing and rolling back, or this reversibility clause that is envisioned. What is the context on the other side, which builds on my argument that it should be re-examined? We have seen in various candidate countries the falling support for the EU project, both with the populations and elites. It differs, of course, from country to country and from year to year, but it is obvious. In some of the previous questions, our Macedonian colleagues spoke about famous theories by Professor Schimmerfelling of an external incentive model, which can be applied, and when applied to different reform areas in the region, we can see the problems which arise. What I would also like to point out is, for example, this argument by Professor Muftul Erbaj, that the perspective that all Balkan countries, if given the option, would have choose immediate and full membership may have changed. So, in that mind, having that in mind, we can explore the differentiation, both what I claim is the existing type of differentiated integration and the future. So, in legal terms, what is already in place? So, firstly, comprehensive stabilization and association agreements, then energy community treaty. In transport sectors, we have both transport community, which is a developing cooperation mechanism, also participation in open sky agreement, and then a quite wide-ranging participation in various EU programs in science, education, youth, health, so on. What also needs to be mentioned and is often neglected is wide and developing engagement with the EU agencies. Having in mind that there are almost 40 bodies of this type across the policy areas, and if we look and examine, we can see that Balkan countries do engage with many of these. So what are the alternative models to membership that are currently available and that I'm thinking of, and also many other scholars are thinking about and debating? First is, of course, the model of European Economic Area. We can also speak about Switzerland. We can also think about bringing association process to the next level within existing treaties, and I will argument whether it is possible. But also, I think it's prudent to revisit the idea from one of the famous speeches of Professor Prodi from 2002, and this idea of sharing everything with union but institutions, not excluding the possibility of developing new structures with our neighbors at a later stage if necessary. Indeed, it was mentioned in a wider context and not particularly for the candidate countries, but I argue it can be envisaged for legal instruments. In terms of the European Economic Area model, its applicability is questionable, primarily because these are rich nations who are opting out from the membership, not needing the EU transformative power in a way Balkan societies do. They are also net contributors to EU budget and basically paying in order to participate in the internal market. Finally, this model also entails something which is usually called rule taking without decision making, and that is something which indeed is already in place in some areas such as competition law or state aid when it comes to Balkan states which undertook, which obliged to align with any future development of the EU law. What are the possibilities to extend association? Actually, current treaties are very open to that. Both Article 8 of the Treaty of the European Union and Article 2017 actually gives ground for wide kind of variety of cooperation. The challenge is in what ways this association can be extended to offer some or many benefits of the membership. On the other hand, I think it's very important to balance, on one side, how to make EU attractive again for the Western Balkans, while making the engagement of the Western Balkans acceptable to the populations of the member states of the European Union. So, as I think was pointed out several times during the discussions this morning, we are speaking about a small region, small scale of regional economies compared to the rest of the continent. So, in economic terms, it's not it would not be a huge bite for the EU. What could be kind of contested is a free movement of people, but we have already seen different kinds of arrangements for latest member states who were not able to join their respective citizens to join the labor market immediately. Other important point is gradual opening of structural and agricultural funds, or recreating the pre-accession aid. And as we have seen from the latest documents of just a few days ago, or more broadly something that is being discussed in the last couple of months, it is on a horizon. We'll see how this new investment mechanism could look like, but we are also seeing some kind of movements in that direction. Finally, extending already wide participation in various programs, engagement with bodies in the agencies is also possible. So coming briefly to my conclusion, I state again that it's time to examine tangible non-membership scenarios. There are possibilities to further engage countries. We can have in mind experiences of more developed non-members. We can also look for other options, sharing everything, but institutions should be re-envisaged. And finally, coming up with the 3 unlikely scenarios or option, likely or unlikely. So first one would be all candidates indefinitely remaining candidates, or in status which is similar to this, with few incentives or extensions of policies, abandoning enlargement but advancing differentiated integration, and then there is a kind of open buffet of how it can look like. And finally, and I think very unlikely at least in coming years, would be some kind of membership, but with comprehensive cooperation and verification mechanisms, but learning on Romanian and Bulgarian cases who did have it. So with that, I would conclude my presentation.
Thank you very much, Marco, for your presentation. It was a nice follow-up to Jovan's presentation, because the first one alerted us about the danger of differentiated integration. Yourself, you explained the scenario and what implies is of this scenario and in terms of institutional/legal terms. I noticed your comment about the size of the economy of the region, and it reminds me an anecdotal discussion 2 years ago in the Sofia summit between Borisov and Donald Tusk. Borisov said that, come on, we're talking here about a region that in terms of economy it's about Slovakia, in terms of population it's around Romania. And Donald Tusk replied to him, yes, but in terms of problems it is France and Germany combined. With this comment, which I'm now turning to Iva Plaushku, I hope I'm pronouncing well the name, who is the Backlog Reduction Officer at the High Court of Albania, and also affiliated with the East Management Institute. And she's going to speak about a very specific problem, a very specific precondition in the EU integration process, and this is the vetting process that has given much pain to Albania in the last years. Iva, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for being here and sharing this knowledge that we have about a specific topic regarding our countries and our region as well. I am here to talk about the vetting process as part of the justice reform that Albania took, in order as a precondition for fulfillment of the political criteria to start the negotiation process with the European Union. It was foreseen since the Thessaloniki conference that the Western Balkan countries will be part of the European Union, and the integration will be as a whole, as a region in that specific organization that is the European Union. As we can say, to fulfill the criteria and to be part of the Union, we need to follow the political criteria, economic criteria, and the capacity to adopt all the laws and all the requirements from the EU. When it comes to the political criteria, the fulfillment of the rule of law, the enhancement of democracy is crucial. As part of this is the judiciary reform. The Albanian parliament took a strong and enormous effort in order to have the improvement of the rule of law and of the judiciary in a specific way, with the adoption of the set of laws that will allow some institutions, new government institution, in order to have a new judiciary system, independent judiciary. In this way, we adopted anonymously in 2016 the law on the transitional evaluation of judges and prosecutors in the Republic of Albania. That is it is the vetting law that is part of the package of the justice reform system. Together with the law on transitional evaluation of judges, we have adopted several laws related to the new law that governs the High Court, the Constitutional Court, the law on the status of judges and prosecutors, and 2 specific laws that regulate the General Prosecutor Office and the specialized courts against corruption and organized crime, and also the laws on the special prosecutor against organized crime and corruption. It was foreseen that the process of reevaluation of judges and prosecutors will give the opportunity to have a new justice system without corrupted judges, with those who are base merit in their position and who have their background who is clear and without any affiliation to the organized crime. In the beginning of the law was suspended because there were questions of unconstitutionality of this reform that we undertook. And seeing that the Constitutional Court was invested by some union of judges in order to determine if this law was in accordance with the Constitution and with the European Court of Human Rights that will guarantee the right of the assessees of the subject of the vetting law to be impartially and judged by an independent and impartial institution and independent bodies that were in charge of doing the vetting process. That in 2017, the Constitutional Court ruled a final decision that decided that the vetting law was in accordance with the Albanian Constitution, that they will not undermine the principle of fair trial to the assessees that were subject to this law, and it finally that law was necessary to be adopted in order to fulfill the obligation of the Albanian to have an independent and impartial judiciary system and to give to the public the trust again, to give again the trust to the public, to the justice system at all, and not only to the judiciary. The reform on the judiciary, it is linked with the European Union integration. Since the European Commission, since 2016, 2017, 2018, in their progress report, has always stated that this reform needed to go on, needed to progress in order to have the fulfillment of the political criteria. And finally, we can see that the result of this reform in this 2020 progress report, they can see. So now we have swifted from a report that was seen that we have a lack of preparation on the judiciary to some moderate preparation on the judiciary. It is not so much, but still it is a precondition that we can maybe in the near future to open the negotiation. So far from the results of this vetting process and of the reform on the judiciary, we have two institutions that were established, independent institutions that will do the vetting process. They are the Independent Qualification Commission and the Appeal Chamber. And so the assessees can have a full right to go to like a normal legal process that go in the court. And after that, they can claim even to European Court of the Human Rights in case that they feel that the independent institutions that do the vetting to them have missed some of the criteria to be assessed in accordance with the Article 6 of the European Court of Article 6 of the European Convention of Human Rights. As we can see so far, the results of this vetting process here, we have a few number of judges on the Constitutional Court and on the High Court, and in some period of time, the Constitutional Court was not working because there was not the number necessary for them to have a plenary session about the request and the claims sent it to this court. And even the High Court was on 1 year that was not able to function because the number of the judges, it remains with one judge. At the end, it remains with only one single judge that was in charge on that court. Nowadays, this court are not functioning properly. Even the High Court has now only 3 members, and they are waiting for other members to fulfill all the vacancies there. And even the Constitutional Court, there are still vacancies in the court. They needed to. The situation, it is linked with both two courts because you need to have the full members of the High Court that they will elect 3 members of the Constitutional Court. For that reason why even the European Commission, the other international community has stressed out on how the vetting process needed to go more efficiently, needed to speed up in order to have more vetted judges and prosecutors who will be members in the future members of this court and who will fill all those vacancies, even in other courts, like the appeal court or the court of the first instance, as for example. But as we can say from the public perception, the vetting process was seen as a key element to remove from the system those judges who were corrupted, who were not capable of giving justice to them, and why not to end up of their long history in front of the door of the court. It is a long process. It's still ongoing, and we have still nearly 1/3 of the 800 members that were initially their name were sent to be vetted, but we believe that maybe they will speed up the process, and by the end, we will see how they will find a legal mechanism, and that will be in accordance with the Constitution, maybe to prolong the mandate of these independent commissions, because even with the annex of the Constitution, we have sent a specific annex to them who regulate their mandate, and it is said there that the mandate will be only 5 years, but still we have passed more than 3 years, and still the work is still going on, and it's not finished yet, because they need to cap even the second phase, that is the appeal chamber, and still even in the appeal chamber we have subject assessees who are not vetted yet, and they don't have a final decision issued. We hope that this, and my claim is that this process was needed, was necessary. Our capacities, I don't believe that we had at the beginning the capacities to go through this process, but in the moment that the judiciary system was, I believe that it was necessary, and it is a precondition sine qua non. We cannot enter, and we cannot fulfill the political criteria to go to the European Union, to be part of the European Union. And on the other hand, the process is necessary, and we can say that when it comes to the chapter 22 and 23, we had done a lot compared to other states of the region who have started the negotiation processes without undertaking these reforms. So we undertook the reforms prior opening the chapters, and that could be a signal, and maybe that will have a shorter period of time when we will negotiate the chapter, at the moment that we will start negotiating the chapters, because all these criteria and all those work that they give to us, the European Commission and the European Union give to us, is already done since the beginning. And I will close this presentation about the vetting process. This is a generalistic panorama. I don't know if we can have time to have more detailed elements about how the process is going in more details with specific institutions that are part of the reform, not only with the vetting process, but only the judiciary, that the vetting process is part of the judiciary reform. I hope that gave to all the participants a clue on how the process is still going on in Albania, and it's a debate, is an actual debate, and that will be prolonged maybe in the near future, let's say for 2 or 3 years or more. And so thank you very much for your attention, and hope to have been helpful and to have given to you a general idea of the process as well.
Thanks a lot, Iva. That was a very elaborate presentation of Albanian's effort to undergo the vetting process. I have also several questions for yourself later on. once we hear the last presentation for this session. It is by Maria Fysekidou, who is a visiting research fellow in my department in the University of Peloponnese, and she's going to talk on the theme of territorial governance and capacity building in the Western Balkans as a means of integration. Maria, you have the floor. You should open your camera and also your microphone. Yeah, please open the microphone and the camera, and the floor is yours.
You hear me?
Yes, please, you may go on, please. We hear you.
Okay, so thank you very much. My name is Maria Fysekidou. We faced some technical issues concerning, the devices, and I hope that you can see the presentation and everything is okay.
Please go ahead.
Can you see it?
Yeah, yes, we're seeing it. Please go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to talk about the territorial cooperation issue, which is a very, I suppose it's a very crucial thing concerning what we conceive as territorial cohesion and territorial capital in the European Union. It was launched in late 80s, but it had a very different rhythm of developing in different areas in the European Union. So in the area of that we examine, we're going to see a few things about the concept of territorial cooperation and how this is connected with the European Union's approach to the Western Balkans. We're going to have a very brief presentation of how the European Union, financially at least, supported this kind of interventions in the area and how these interventions affected or not this issue in the area. So option is that territorial cooperation established some certain cooperation mechanisms among actors, the engaged actors, both vertically and horizontally, activating some learning channels and practices, governance practices within different spatial entities in the area. There's been a much big debate about how territorial cooperation has affected the Europeanization process in the area in which it has been applied. I suppose that in the Western Balkans, this whole experimentation was a lot more difficult. So what this thing is, territorial cooperation is a form of cooperation between national authorities, cross-border, transnational, interregional, and it appears to be an experimentation in spatial, in institutional, and administrative terms. What is very important here is that in some cases in Europe, it has led to the formulation of new functional units, big functional units in the European area, in the European map, which is the most institutionalized and a form of cooperation. On the other hand, we have softer approaches and projects that something like platforms, exchange of practices and things like that. Institutionally, I think that one of the most important things that territorial cooperation brings to the table is the institutional innovations, meaning that areas, regions, sub-local, sub-national entities had the opportunity to address their local problems with their partners from other countries in a way that not omitted the central national state. Again, this is the most profound way of cooperation, but mostly it enabled the local authorities to act as interlocutors in common territorial problems and issues, cross-border ones. In administrative terms, I think that territorial cooperation brought in the same table national authorities from different regions, affecting this way or creating a learning channel. So these programs were launched back in the late 50s, in the early 60s from the Council of Europe, but the European Union, the European Commission adopted the first initiatives, the Interreg initiatives, back in the late 80s. What is very important about these initiatives is up to a certain point, they financed what we call capacity building, meaning enhancing the institutional capacity of public authorities, stakeholders, exchanging good practices, expertise, and things like that, always in a cross-border level. So overall, territorial governance and territorial cooperations are interlinked in a very profound way, mostly because territorial governance is the approach of that puts the place-based approach in the table, and it describes the relationship between governance and territory, and this is where territorial cooperation is really very important, meaning that it brings local, regional, national authorities in the same table to address common cross-border problems. So let's Western Balkans. Western Balkans opted for a regional approach in order to achieve stability among conflicting countries and a normalization of relations among them, predominantly stabilizing as each country had applied or expressed back in the time interest in entering the European Union. Mostly it launched a multilateral political dialogue in the area. But the cooperation in the territorial cooperation began during the decade of 90s, and most of these programs were regarded as integral part of the Western Balkan countries program to become members of the community in the foreseeable future or later on, quietly aligned with the Stability Pact. During the years, the most important programs that were applied in the Western Balkans were the FAIR program, the CARDS program, and since 2007, it was the instrument from pre-accession assistance. This is a map that shows the eligible areas during the programming period that is running now. These are the Western Balkans, and what is mostly important, and we won't spend more time in that, is that the policy areas that this instrument addressed was well linked to their future in the accession procedure. And mostly it aimed at financing reforms in preparation for the union membership and related with institution and capacity building. As in every other operational program in cohesion policy, all these programs that were applied in the area entailed a very complex and maybe difficult or innovative way of acting, procedures, processes for all the stakeholders. This effort that began back in the 90s and was reinforced during 2000 and 2007 is going to continue in the next programming period from 2021 to 2024. And here we can see that in the future, in the next programming period, boosting growth and cohesion in border regions is one of the crucial things for cohesion policy, and mainly reducing the obstacles in cross-border areas. This is very important for the area because with adjacent countries for many years, but what is very important is next. What's coming next is cross-border public services, which is a step forward, of course. And here we can see, I don't know if this map is, you can see it well. This is a map of cross-border public services. So as you can see in the area, okay, we're lagging behind, but it's the new dynamic for the next period. So the Western Balkans are going to try to cooperate in order to achieve cross-border health, for instance, cross-border infrastructure. So this is a very ambitious hope as regards the European Commission, but at the same time, it brings to the table the need for the territorial potential of these areas to come up. So what we did is we recorded the programs that applied in the Western Balkans since mostly since 1994. Here, it's a very brief presentation of the relevant programs. As you can see, there are many programs that run in the area. Now, this for all the stakeholders and all the cooperating countries in the Western Balkans. Mostly common in most of them is a very limited place-based governance approach, which was pretty evident during the creation of the projects and the application of the projects at the Commission. There has always been a very poor horizontal cooperation between sectors and stakeholders, and of course, there was a painstaking process of political stabilization in most of the area. What was really important was the insufficient technical and managerial capacities of the cooperating countries. This was a big problem because, and big opportunity as well, and because technically it hampered every attempt to bring to the table projects that were functional and mutually of mutual interest to all parties. The pre-accession assistance mostly under the pre-accession instrument, the IPA instrument, during 2007-2013, was that the cooperation achievements very much depended on the progress achieved by the various policy dialogue structures, mostly intergovernmental level or at joint parliamentary level. It did not entail a lot of subnational entities, so it was a bit centralized. But the political dialogue on public administration reform achieved some progress, mostly because it took place in the framework of the stabilization under the association agreements. But IPA supported administrational reforms, including public finance, recruitments, public administration, full budget cycle, tax collection, budgeting, and things like that. So we can say that public administration reforms were generally reinforced. And the political dialogue on these kind of reforms was quite Additionally, what the Commission tried to apply in the area was had a lot of obstacles from the Commission itself sometimes, mostly in terms of monitoring and measuring indexes and the outcomes of the projects that were implemented. And the national programs, the operational programs, had often very broad objectives. And there's a good example. During the pre-accession instrument, the IPA one during 2007-2013, the objectives were so broad that sometimes the outcomes could not be measurable. But it's the case of in the case of Montenegro and Serbia, whose accession negotiations started in 2012 and 14 respectively. The Commission had to define clear and measurable rule of law objectives, which, if not met, they could block enlargement negotiations. So, at the same time, the absorption was sometimes hampered by this, by the aforementioned weak administrative capacity and technical experience of the stakeholders in the Western Balkans. So this is a reason why many of these countries received further technical assistance. Moreover, these kind of programs had a kind of impact in the reforms that the countries to undertake. They adopted the conditionalities in order for the countries to have the financial allowance. So back in 2013, this is an example. The integration process in Bosnia and Herzegovina came to an end, and because of that, when Bosnia failed to adopt the justice sector reform strategy, they were suspended from the ongoing budget support in the field of justice. So this is a very strict example of how conditionalities in cohesion policy are applied in some cases. Had the opportunity to cooperate with adjacent countries, which was a very ambitious experiment back in the time. So networks that were created through these cooperations, we investigated the Interreg II programs from 1994 to 2000, the Greece, Albania, and the Greece Fyrom, and the Archimed program. So there was a very typical network created there among the authorities with relatively stable relationships rather than hierarchical ones. The actors were mostly regions and some municipalities with common interests in territorial cooperation, according to their. So this here we can see how this network works, and this is a very indicative way, a very indicative figure of how these programs have worked, not only in the case of cooperation between Greece and the adjacent countries, but also between the Balkans, the other Western Balkans countries themselves. We can say a lot about this figure, mostly because it sets a way of cooperating between horizontally and vertically. By investigating these programs, we recorded some aspects that were common, that there were very heterogeneous administrative mechanisms with really very strict administrative hierarchies, a broad spatial dispersion of the participants, in some cases a lack of experience on previous cooperation, which led to the outsourcing of outsourcing consultancy and a lot of extra technical support for those. We tried to see what were the outcomes in strategic cooperation at the level of the entire programs and at the level of at the project level. So there was scarce decision making in most of the cases. Central state authorities ensured all primary program management functions in most of the cases. There was scarce direct involvement of regional or local authorities, and focused intervention strategies were in all programs at a medium level. At project level cooperation, centralized management authorities and arrangements took place. A lot of working groups, but no recorded specific outputs with regard to a deepening of cooperation among the cooperating authorities. Territorial cooperation was and is an ongoing experimentation for the Balkan regional and administrative systems. It is a very big opportunity for institutional exchange. It didn't lead to any long-term structure of cooperation, as in the Baltic area, for example, with no new special arrangements. It appears that it had a very extensive geographical segmentation of the projects, the budgets, big differentiation in progress between individual national teams. Still, it is a learning process. And in the cases of programs that began back in 2000 and have been, they are continuing in the next programming periods, we have a better reflection of what could be the outcome of this exchange of experiences. But generally, the participation to transnational or cross-border kind of projects under shared management with the national authorities is a very highly valuable experience in the context of the last communication of the European Union accession process. So the last thing I could say about that is that when a country when a country begins to take part in whatever cohesion policy programs it can take part. This entails a transfer of modes, of experiences, and of a way of doing things, at least in administrative manners. So maybe this could be could open the discussion for how Europeanization could occur through these programs. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria, for the presentation. Please close the sharing part. On top of it, you can stop sharing the presentation.
I'm going to find, okay.
Thank you. And please open your camera and close the microphone. Okay, it was a very interesting presentation that gave us a lot of technical details about the main problems that prevail in the process of strengthening the administrative capacity and the connectivity in the region, two priorities that have been highlighted in several EU enlargement documents. So we have a little bit of time for a short discussion. I have several questions to all of you. I'm going very briefly to start in the same order that we done this session. I will start with Jovan and Marco with exactly the same question. Both of your presentations showed the dangers and the possibilities of the prospect of a differentiated integration of the region. What I didn't hear, and I would like that you elaborate more, is that to what extent is it fair to speak of a destiny of the region when and if there is a different perspective, a different trajectory for countries so diverse with so different problems, such as North Macedonia or Bosnia and Herzegovina? To what extent is it fair to speak about the destiny of 6 countries that have serious problems, but not similar problems? They have different problems. And whether in your presentations you are able to somehow speculate that one or two of these 6 countries may eventually become EU member, or between these countries, whether there will be also differentiated integration among these countries. A second question, just for Jovan, because he mentioned something that I have been for some years professing, and I would like to hear his view. Jovan, you commented the last enlargement strategy paper, and you said that the reversibility entails dangers. It may the reversibility of the process may alienate the Western Balkan countries from the EU. My question is that if the sanctions is not the remedy to backsliding, what could have been the solution? What Brussels should have done to face backsliding beyond reversibility, which is a negative step? These are my questions for the two of you, then I'll return to our two ladies. I will start with Jovan.
Thank you. Can you hear me now? Yes? Okay. I will leave the more difficult question for Marco. So your first question, Nico, and maybe I'll try to say a few words about the second question directed to me. In effect, actually, instead of having the sanctions policy, the reverse clause, I think the carrot and the stick policy could continue, should continue, not could, should continue. And this is something that I don't see enough in the new enlargement methodology. Yes, there are perceived and notable motivations for the candidates, for the EU hopefuls from the Western Balkans, but the business of their reforms is so difficult, as we have seen in the last years, that I don't expect a big, and I will use Mao Zedong's words, a big leap forward towards even a separate individual package or cluster of reforms in the near future. So what scares me, what frightens me, is actually that the sanctions might come first and the carrot can come later. But as I said, whatever I said is a speculation, actually, and the new methodology should be tried. Unfortunately, as in many previous occasions, neither the EU nor the EU hopefuls from the Western Balkans actually know who will use this new methodology or not. This is especially the case of Serbia. They had conflicting statements at the beginning, and now we think we know that Serbia will go along the new methodology, but nothing is clear. And as we see also, there is a big delay in the beginning of negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania. So this only confirms my pessimism about the future EU-Western Balkan relations. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for your answer. And before going to Marco, if I would stick a little bit more on this. Last week were published the European Enlargement Progress Reports. I don't know if you had the time to have a look at them. My impression, I would like to hear your thoughts of this, is that we don't see any new methodology in them. They look as if they were prepared last year with the addition of extra pages in detail to confuse us with too much data. So is it a sign that the new methodology is too much talk about nothing? Or, I mean, if we don't see the progress reports, and reversibility should have a substance, should have an element. If the progress reports are business as usual, was it finally just a hot steam, what was announced in February, or you expect more steps in the future that they will also adjust processes such as the enlargement progress reports?
I think Marco should reply to this one.
Okay, Marco, you have the floor for both questions.
Well, we are just starting with the new methodology. So let's say these reports are kind of a continuity of the old methodology, and I think, well, as Professor Teokarevic rightly pointed out, it's very confusing which path Serbia is going to take, whether it's going to go with the new one, because it can choose, but we still don't know whether it has officially notified the willingness to go with the new one. I would briefly agree that the incentives and sanction approach should exist. I mean, you need to have something at least partially driving some partial reforms. And going to your tricky question, whether we are fair to look at the whole region as one complete as a one parcel, I would say we would probably need to go into more differentiated approach, because countries have moved in different ways. Montenegro is quite advanced, and with the new political developments, I think it is also fulfilling some of the criteria. So in some partially likely scenario, Montenegro could be the one joining the EU in a foreseeable future, let's say in a decade, but with some, I suppose, very strict verification mechanisms. And coming to the main point of your questions, yes, probably there is going to be differentiation between candidates. They are completely every candidate is a completely different set of problems on its own. I mean, not going into internal problems in Macedonia, in Bosnia, the Kosovo status as also a potential candidate. So in that terms, we'll probably see differentiation, unless there is a strong political will to move forward the integration of the region, which I don't see likely before the larger debate envisaged for the conference on the future of Europe is basically finished in a couple of years' time. That has been put on a hold as well with this COVID crisis. So the answer is I'm not sure, but it will probably be the case.
Thank you a lot. Thank you a lot. I will have bet as a front runner in North Macedonia if they resolve the language dispute now with Bulgaria. The Macedonian dispute has many legs and appears everywhere from one country to another. But I will have my bet will have been for North Macedonia. Anyway, Iva, my question to you will be: this was a very detailed, as I said before, a comprehensive explanation of the vetting process. My question is much more political. Do you have the impression that the Albanian political system, the Albanian executive, has the political will to carry out the vetting process and the justice reform? Does the Albanian executive want an independent justice? I'm asking this because I have in mind a very recent case, the case of the demolition of the Albanian National Theatre, the National Theatre of Tirana, which was pending discussion in the Constitutional Court and also being discussed at the same moment, being investigated also by SPAC. And despite this, the authorities advanced with its demolition, disregarding any justice. So is it just a very complicated question of capacity building, or is it also a lack of political will?
Well, when it comes in terms of political will, I cannot say like exactly it's yes or no. It is difficult to proclaim this in this way because the vetting process has started. It's going on and it cannot stop. When it comes to the new institutions, the Constitutional Court and the High Court, the problems arise because first by the law and after that by the political will of the organs who will elect or who will nominate the members of the court. Since that's why I said to that the vacancies on the Constitutional Court with the High Court are interlinked within them. So you have political statement, a statement from embassies, members of the embassies who say, okay, the Constitutional Court, all the vacancies in the Constitutional Court need to be filled. But how can you fill the vacancies on the Constitutional Court in the case that the High Court has not his full members in order to elect, because the law states that 3 members from the Constitutional Court are elected by the Parliament, 3 by the Presidency, and 3 names are given by the High Court. Best idea, we can have only 6 members of the Constitutional Court now. But due to the vetting process that is slowly progressing, because the members, now we have strict criteria even for members who will be part of the Constitutional Court. At the end, we have a process that is stopped because the independent, the justice appointing institution who will give the numbers of the member of the Constitutional Court has no names. Who will be the member of the Constitutional Court so far? They are still opening vacancies, opening calls to fill the vacancies, but there are still no clear name who will fill this and how the Constitutional Court will be with 6 members. We hope that by the end of the year, there will be 6 members and maybe the Constitutional Court now, they will start to give decisions. And when it comes to the question of the National Theatre, we have a lot of pending cases in the Constitutional Court. It's not only that. And the political elite, the government, I don't believe that they can stop this process. Maybe they can slow down that a little bit, but for sure it cannot be, because even it is the international community that is putting a lot of pressure on that. And for that reason, we cannot stop, for sure, we cannot stop. I hope, as a professional and as a lawyer, that this political pressure can stop a little bit, and at the end we can have like a truly free, impartial and independent judiciary system, so that will enable us to give justice at the end. Hope that my answer to your question was clear enough.
Thank you very much. Yes, I was missing this political aspect because it was mainly technical, your discussion about processes and what has happened. I will also go finish this session with Maria with also a political question. You know, what you show us in your presentation is that finally, it's not a question only of being the Western Balkans under-financed or not. It's also about failing those money that have been given so far to have an added value, because there are administrative hurdles, there is lack of coordination, there are bureaucratic procedures. So it's not only a question about size of money. Last week, the Commissioner for Enlargement went in the region. He chose to tour the region just after he published the progress reports. And while he was bringing the progress reports that had some bad news, which was the lack of progress mainly, he was simultaneously telling them, don't read the papers, forget it. What I came here to tell you is I have an investment plan, which is something like 9 or 30 billion euro, depending on how many years we count it. And I came here to speak about money with you. I actually found it bizarre, because it was the worst moment to talk about money. This was the moment that he had to talk about problems, and he could have visited next week about the money. But anyhow, there is a sense for some observers that the EU has understood that the region can fall prey to other powers such as Russia or China that have come to invest in the region, and is going for that purpose to invest more money in the region. The thing is, though, that as you mentioned, it is not only a question of amounts, it's a question of procedures and of capacity building. So if you can very briefly in 2-3 lines, what will you recommend to do differently in this investment plan or in this IPA 3, or call it whatever, the next EU package to the region, in order to have a genuine impact and to stop the increased divergence of economies between the region and the EU?
So there's a lot of, I have to share about why this happened, and it reflects not what happens in what is proposed for the next programming period in the area, but also in the rest of the Europe. There has been a very big battle in the European Commission concerning investments, reforms, and all these kind of priorities. I think that the basic notion that is very fancy during this the forthcoming period is the word reforms, and the European Commission has made a very significant change in its management style, and for the first time after 20 years, it proposes it's in the draft regulations, a way of interfering in what the recipient countries, the eligible areas, are allocated as money, putting the Commission itself in the management. So maybe this answers a lot of questions about why the Commission has changed its plans concerning investments and reforms. It is the first time, actually, after all those decades, that the Commission wants to play an active role in the management of the funds that it provides to the countries, proposing in most of the cases that concern reform, in all of the cases that concern capacity building, for sure, the type of direct management and not shared or indirect management. This is crucial. It has it arises a big discussion about the subsidiarity principle per se. So I suppose that the comments of the commissioner have to do with the new instrument that was proposed just a few months ago, and it replaced all the other proposals concerning reforms and investments. This is about the new, it's called the Resilience and the Recovery Instrument, and the previous draft regulations were withdrawn, and the support that was directed to these countries is now going to be under new regulations that they are under elaboration. They're regulations. So I think this is very important, and this is very strange, and this is innovative. And maybe it's dangerous as well that the Commission wants to interfere in the interventions that are going to be financed by the Commission by interfering in the implementation. I mean, it is the proposal is very problematic, but there is a rush on behalf of the Commission to support this decision. I don't know if this answers the question.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like, unless any of you has to add something or another comment, I would like to thank all four of you for your presentations and also for this discussion. Also, all those people who are from the morning attending us. Somewhere here we're closing for today, and I would like to recall you that the program continues tomorrow at 10 o'clock Greek time with another session on the Balkans and another session about Turkey and Eastern Partnership at 20 past 10. Thanks a lot. Thank you a lot. Thanks a lot.